I've learned that life doesn't always give you the luxury of a slow breakdown. Sometimes everything you've built crumbles in the span of an afternoon, and you're left standing in the rubble wondering how you didn't see it coming, even though looking back, the cracks were always there. This is the story of how my marriage ended and came back to life in the most unexpected way possible, all triggered by a single sentence and 17 phone calls that changed everything. I thought I understood about my wife. My name is Robert, and I'm going to tell you about the worst and best day of my life happening simultaneously, which I didn't think was possible until it happened to me. The meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday in late March. I remember because the weather had just started to shift from winter to spring, and I'd been thinking about how the world seemed to be coming alive again. New growth, fresh starts, that kind of thing. Ironic, given what was about to happen. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company, and I'd been with the firm for 9 years. I'm good at what I do. I'm organized, I'm reliable, I show up, I deliver. My boss trusted me, my team respected me, and I had a solid reputation in the industry. The meeting was supposed to be routine, a quarterly review with my direct supervisor, my boss's boss, and the human resources director. Nothing unusual. Promotions were being discussed, new project opportunities, that sort of thing. I'd prepared for weeks, gathered my documentation, organized my accomplishments in neat little folders. I was expecting to walk out of that meeting with a raise and possibly a title change. My wife, Claire, also works in a corporate environment. She's a business analyst for a financial firm, brilliant with data and numbers, the kind of person who can spot a pattern in chaos that most people would miss entirely. We've been married for 12 years. We met at a mutual friend's wedding, and there was an instant connection, the kind where you just know this person is going to be important to you. We dated for 2 years, got engaged on a beach in Puerto Rico, had a small wedding with close friends and family. For the first 6 years of our marriage, I genuinely felt like I'd won the lottery. I had this incredible woman who loved me, who was brilliant and funny and beautiful, and who seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. But somewhere around year 7, things started to change. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 small things that accumulated until I looked around one day and realized I didn't quite recognize the dynamic anymore. She became more distant. She'd spend hours on her laptop in her office with the door closed, and when I'd ask what she was working on, she'd give vague answers. She stopped wanting to go out with friends as much. She started sleeping in our guest room sometimes, saying her back hurt and she needed a firmer mattress. She'd pick fights over small things. The way I loaded the dishwasher, the fact that I was 5 minutes late coming home, the way I spoke to her in front of other people. Most of the time I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. I suggested therapy several times. She said therapy was for people with real problems. I suggested we just try couples counseling for maintenance, the way you'd maintain a car. She said she wasn't willing to admit that there was something wrong with us. I suggested we take a vacation, spend some quality time together. She said she was too busy with work. It felt like everything I offered was being rejected, but I couldn't quite figure out the underlying issue because every time I tried to have a serious conversation about it, she'd either shut down or turn it around to be about something I'd done wrong. Looking back now, I can see the signs of depression and anxiety. I can see the patterns of someone who was struggling and didn't know how to articulate it. But at the time, all I could see was a wife who seemed to resent me, and I responded the way a lot of men respond to rejection, by trying harder, by doing more, by attempting to fix something that I didn't actually understand was broken. 3 days before this fateful meeting, Claire and I had an argument about nothing. I'd mentioned that I was looking forward to the quarterly review, that I thought I might get promoted. She'd made a comment about how I spent so much time focused on work that I'd probably lose her eventually and not even notice. I'd tried to reassure her, to tell her that would never happen, that she was my priority. She'd said something to the effect of, "You're so caught up in climbing the ladder that you don't even see who's standing right next to you." I'd gone to bed that night feeling anxious and confused, not understanding what I'd done to trigger such hostility. The morning of the meeting, Claire barely spoke to me. She was already dressed and on her laptop when I got out of the shower. I asked her what she wanted for dinner. She said she didn't care. I asked if she'd be home late from work. She said probably. There was an edge to everything. Her tone, her body language, the way she wouldn't make eye contact. I considered asking her what was wrong again, but I was exhausted from having versions of that same conversation over and over, so I just kissed her goodbye and headed to work. I spent most of the day in meetings leading up to the 3 o'clock appointment. I was dressed nicely, wearing the suit I wear for important presentations, my resume and documentation portfolio under my arm. I was nervous, but optimistic. This was going to be a good day. I could feel it. I was going to get promoted, and maybe with this new position, maybe with more security and more confidence in my career, I could focus on fixing things with Claire. Maybe I could be the husband she needed me to be if I wasn't so anxious about my job situation. I arrived at the conference room at 2:55, 5 minutes early as always. My boss, Richard, was already there. So was Patricia from HR. And then, at exactly 3 o'clock, Claire walked in. I was shocked. She didn't work for my company. There was no reason she should be in this meeting. She'd never been to my office before, to my knowledge. She was wearing her work clothes, a sharp black dress and heels, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked professional and cold, and I could see something in her expression that I'd seen a lot of lately, a kind of righteous anger, like she was about to do something she'd been planning for a long time. "Claire?" I said. "What are you doing here?" Richard looked confused. "Do you two know each other?" "This is my husband," Claire said flatly. She didn't sit down. She remained standing, her purse held in front of her like a shield. "Oh," Richard said, and I could see him recalibrating. "Well, this is an interesting surprise. We were just about to go over Robert's performance review. That's actually why I'm here," Claire said. "I'm here to talk about Robert's performance, but not at work." My stomach dropped. Something was very wrong. "I don't think this is the appropriate venue," Claire continued, looking directly at me now, and her eyes were hard as stone. "Robert has some serious behavioral and ethical issues that need to be addressed, issues that extend beyond his professional life and into his personal conduct." "What are you talking about?" I asked, and I could hear the panic creeping into my voice. "I'm talking about the fact that you're a liar," Claire said. She turned to face Richard and Patricia. "My husband has been engaged in inappropriate contact with his administrative assistant for the past 8 months. I have evidence, text messages, credit card statements showing charges for hotel rooms on nights when he told me he was working late, photos from his work email that show the two of them together. The room seemed to tilt. I couldn't breathe properly. That's not true. I don't have an administrative assistant. I haven't done any of that. Her name is Vanessa," Claire continued as if I hadn't spoken. "She works in the scheduling department. You've been seeing her since July. You've been lying to me, you've been cheating on me, and you've been using company resources to facilitate this affair." "Claire, I don't know what you're talking about. There is no affair. Vanessa is a colleague. I might have exchanged emails with her about work, but that's it. That's all." She pulled out her phone and showed it to Richard. I couldn't see what was on the screen from where I was standing, but I could see Richard's face change. His expression went from shocked to disapproving to angry. "This doesn't look good, Robert," he said quietly. "I haven't seen those messages before," I said. "I don't know what she's showing you, but I'm telling you, I've never been inappropriate with anyone at this company. I've never been inappropriate with anyone. Period." "You're a liar," Claire said, and her voice was surprisingly steady, almost calm. "You've been lying to me for months. You've been lying to your company. You've been lying to yourself about the kind of person you are. And honestly, I can't do this anymore. I can't be married to someone I don't trust. This meeting would be better without you." She set her phone down on the conference table and walked toward the door. Patricia and Richard were both staring at me, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. They believed her. Or at least, they believed something was going on, and that was enough. "Wait," I said, standing up. "Claire, please wait. We need to talk about this. Not here, but we need to talk." She didn't turn around. She just kept walking. The 5 minutes after she left the conference room were the longest 5 minutes of my life. Richard asked me directly if there was any truth to what she'd said. I denied it completely. I told him that I didn't know where these accusations were coming from, that my marriage had been struggling, but I had never cheated on my wife, and I had certainly never done anything inappropriate with anyone at work. He said he'd need to investigate before we could move forward with the review. Patricia said they'd likely need to speak with Vanessa and review my email communications and phone records. I felt sick. I felt like I was watching my career implode in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it because the person I loved most in the world had just systematically dismantled my reputation in front of my boss. I left the office around 4 o'clock, pleading a personal emergency. I drove around for a while trying to calm down, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. By 4:30, my phone had started ringing. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again at 4:32, at 4:34, at 4:37. By the time I pulled over at a rest stop to look at my phone, I had already missed 7 calls, all from different numbers. None of them numbers I recognized. Then my phone rang again. This time I answered because I needed to understand what was happening. Robert? It was my mother. She sounded panicked. Where are you? We've been trying to reach you all afternoon. What's going on? Why are you calling me from an unknown number? Because I'm at the hospital, she said. Robert, there's been an accident. It's Claire. Everything stopped. The world just stopped moving. What do you mean, an accident? I asked, and I could hear the fear in my own voice, a fear that made the professional disaster I'd just experienced seem like absolutely nothing. She was in a car accident about 20 minutes after she left your office. Another car hit her at an intersection. She's being treated in the emergency room, but they're saying it could be serious. They couldn't reach you. They called me because I'm listed as her emergency contact in her phone. Where are you? I was in my car and driving to the hospital before my mother finished speaking. The drive took 20 minutes, and every second of those 20 minutes I was replaying the last conversation I'd had with Claire, which had been an argument 3 days ago about how I didn't pay attention to her. I was thinking about how the last thing I'd ever said to her in person was just goodbye as I left for work. I was thinking about how if something happened to her, the last time I'd see her face would be in that conference room, that hard expression of betrayal and anger. The hospital is a blur in my memory. I remember running through the emergency room entrance. I remember finding my mother in the waiting area, her face streaked with tears. I remember being taken to a small room where a doctor explained to me that Claire had sustained serious injuries, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, a collapsed lung. She was in surgery. They weren't sure yet if she was going to make it. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember time passing. I remember my mother holding my hand and me staring at my phone, which had continued ringing throughout the entire drive to the hospital and into those first hours of waiting. 17 missed calls in total by the time I finally turned the phone on. 17 people calling to ask me where I was, if I was okay. If the rumors about me were true. 17 calls from colleagues, friends, and family members, all wondering if my marriage had really fallen apart, if I'd really been having an affair, if I'd really been the kind of person who would do those things. And none of it mattered. None of it mattered even a little bit, because the woman I loved was in surgery, and I might not get another chance to tell her I was sorry for whatever I'd done, sorry for whatever I'd failed to understand about what she needed from me. Claire survived. That's the thing that I'm most grateful for, even now. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, something shifted between us. She was conscious after the first 48 hours, though heavily medicated. I sat by her bedside for the entire time, barely leaving to use the bathroom. And slowly, as she became more alert, we started to talk. The investigation into the alleged affair had been shut down almost immediately. HR had reviewed my email communications and found nothing inappropriate. They'd interviewed Vanessa, who was confused and upset by the accusations, and who confirmed that our interactions had been entirely professional. The credit card statements Claire had referenced didn't exist. The text messages she'd shown my boss were fabricated. She'd apparently used some kind of app to create fake message threads. There were no photos. There was no affair. There was only a woman who had been suffering from severe depression and anxiety, who had convinced herself that her husband was cheating on her and who had acted out of that conviction in a way that was destructive and harmful to everyone involved, most of all to herself. On the 10th day of Claire's hospitalization, when she was finally lucid enough for a serious conversation, I asked her why she'd done it, why she'd orchestrated that entire scene at my office, why she'd made up an affair that didn't exist. I wanted to hurt you the way you were hurting me, she said. Her voice was weak from the medication and the injury, but her words were clear. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. You were more focused on your career than on us. And I convinced myself that you were cheating because it was easier to be angry than to admit that I was scared. I was scared that our marriage was falling apart, and instead of talking to you about it, I decided to blow it up first. I thought if I was the one destroying it, at least I'd have some control. I held her hand very carefully, aware of the IV in her wrist. I would never cheat on you, I said. I would never do that. But more importantly, I should have noticed that you were struggling. I should have done more to try to help you. You suggested therapy, she said, multiple times. I'm the one who refused. I'm the one who pushed you away. I'm the one who did this. We both did this, I said. We both let our marriage get to a place where you felt like you had to do something this dramatic to make me understand that something was wrong. Over the next 3 months, while Claire recovered from her physical injuries, we both started therapy. Individual therapy for both of us, and then couples therapy after she was well enough to leave the house. Her depression was diagnosed and treated with medication. She worked with a therapist on her anxiety and on the thought patterns that had led her to create such an elaborate narrative in her mind. I worked with a therapist on my tendency to ignore problems and hope they'd go away, on my inability to recognize when the people I loved were struggling, on my own anxiety that had manifested as obsessive focus on career achievement. The accusations against me were formally cleared, and my company actually ended up being weirdly supportive about the whole thing. My boss, Richard, pulled me aside about 3 months after the incident and apologized for his initial judgment. Apparently, HR had informed him that Claire was dealing with serious mental health issues, and he wanted me to know that nothing in the professional world was going to be affected by what had happened. In fact, I did eventually get that promotion I'd been waiting for, but by that point it didn't feel as important to me as it once had. What felt important was coming home in the evening and spending time with my wife. What felt important was having real conversations about how we were both feeling, what we both needed, where our relationship might be heading. What felt important was recognizing the signs that something was wrong and acting on them, instead of just hoping everything would work itself out. The life lesson I've learned from this experience is this: sometimes the people who hurt us most deeply are the people who are hurting most deeply themselves. Claire didn't wake up one morning and decide to be a cruel, destructive person. She woke up every morning feeling scared, feeling invisible, feeling like her marriage was slipping away from her, and she didn't know how to ask for help. Instead of asking, she created a crisis because a crisis at least was something that couldn't be ignored. I think we do this more often than we want to admit. We create drama because we think it's the only way to get someone's attention. We hurt people because we're scared of being hurt first. We sabotage our own happiness because we believe that at least if we're in control of the destruction, we have some power in the situation. And we do this while convincing ourselves that we're justified, that the other person deserves it, that we're the victim in our own story. The real lesson is that communication has to come before crisis, that vulnerability has to come before destruction, that asking for help, even when it's scary, is always better than creating a situation so desperate that someone has to pay attention whether they want to or not. And finally, that when someone we love is struggling, our job isn't to judge them or punish them for how their struggles manifest. Our job is to help them find their way to healing, even when what they're struggling with made us the target of their pain. My marriage almost ended that day because we'd both failed to communicate. It survived because a car accident forced us to stop fighting and start actually seeing each other again. I'm grateful for the second chance, but I'm also grateful that we learned the lesson. Never wait for a crisis to start paying attention to the people you love. Pay attention now. Communicate now. Get help now, because the alternative, waiting until everything falls apart, is infinitely more painful than doing the hard work of staying connected while things are still standing.